to say hi, feel free to share where you're from. Ah, there we go. Excellent. And also feel free, we've got so much support here from CoReach because they've been so generous to put this together. If you're more typing in Arabic, please feel free to type in Arabic and my hosts will translate for me in the chat. So I don't want typing to be a barrier to participation. Someone from Canada, awesome. We have a fairly significant Holacracy presence in Ontario, actually. From Riyadh, excellent. So cool, welcome. We'll get started, Reem, what, in 3 or 4 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
yeah,
excellent. So once you've had a chance to introduce yourself as you join the call today, I see a few people joining every couple minutes. Once you've had a chance to type into chat, I encourage you to take the next 3 to 4 minutes to kind of ground into the space. In Holacracy practice, in every meeting, we do something called a check-in, and we won't have time to do that for everyone here, but I invite you to take just a couple moments quietly to check in with yourself, let go of whatever you were just doing, let go of the day. It's, you know, getting a little later in the evening, and do whatever makes sense to you to get present for the next hour or so that we're going to spend together. I think it'll be really fun. And I'm going to turn off my video and do the same thing, and I'll be back with you in 3 minutes. Okay, hello everyone, welcome. We've got, any reason, Sarah, Reem, okay to get started?
So I'll start, I'll introduce
Please.
it for everyone so we get everyone on board with some introduction and admin and some concerns so everyone is aware of everything. First of all, hello everyone. To those who know me and to those who don't know me, I'm Sarah. I'm from CoReach, and we have CoReach have adopted Holacracy 3 years ago, and we are grateful to start our collaboration and to have it more and more together. Now, I am here as my role of the partners handlers to introduce Rebecca. And with that, I have also as well some stuff that I would be highlighting too. So Rebecca is a partner with Holacracy One. Rebecca have helped organizations of all sizes to adopt into more humane working way and organize authority in organizations. She has a master's in business, and she is currently a resident in California. Now, following Holacracy style, I will be sharing some admin concerns. During the webinar, everyone will be muted. However, feel free, if you have a question to ask it in the Q&A box in Arabic or in English, and we will make sure to read that out loud and to have to cover it, inshallah, within the webinar. And if you have anything that you want to add on, any reflection, anything you just want to share with the rest of the people that are attending with us, please feel free to do so in the chat box. And lastly, during the webinar, there will be some interactive polls of questions which will appear to you. Please do participate with us and be part of them. And yes, if you have anything, do reach out and let us know what you have in mind. And with that, I'll move it back to you, Habibti.
Thank you, dear. Well, hello. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am so excited to be here with you today. I've been working with CoReach for a couple of years now, and this is really exciting to be able to be with all of you, even though I can't physically be there because I so wanted to be. I spend my days helping organizations find new ways, more human ways of working by redistributing power and authority. And I do that using a rule set called the Holacracy Constitution, a set of rules. Holacracy practice is what we tend to call it. Now, I love to talk. I will talk all day, but I also really love to hear from others. So I will monitor the chat box pretty rigorously, and I encourage you to participate as much as possible. And to that end, I want to start with a question, and I'm going to encourage you to type anything that comes up for you, anything that you sense, in answer to the following question: what limits useful change in an organization, either in the organization you're in now or one that you've been in and left because you were frustrated or for any other reason? When you try to make real lasting change in organization, to try new things, to move the needle towards progression, what limits that? So take a moment and type into the chat box. I'd love to hear your responses to what limits useful change in organization. I'm just gonna give you a second to think about that and then type it into the chat. Execution, stubborn and old school mindset. So true. Authority, budget, needing leadership approval, the chart of authority. Yes, chain of command, lack of team spirit, morale. Thank you. These are, yes. Lack of empathy, lack of discussion sometimes, too much discussion sometimes, resistance from upper management. Yeah, getting stuck, not being able to carry the change through, lack of communication. I love it. Yes, all of these things. I can already tell this is definitely the divine audience, bossy minds. I love that. Yeah, painful bureaucracy, overwhelm. The idea that old is gold, yes, the sacred cow as it was, politics, fear, resistance, all of these things, the boss, and then not enough communication, too much, we call it analysis paralysis. All of these things limit change. And so how do we remove those limitations while still driving forward and still organizing well. Really quick, while I've got you all paying attention and participating, I want to ask how familiar my audience is with Holacracy. So you'll notice a polling question just came up. I'm looking at it on my other screen. I'm going to move it over. And I'd encourage you, oh, all right, heard of it, don't know much about it, great. All right, so we've got a couple people already practicing, a few people who've read a bit, and fair enough, we've got a few of you who are in my category I call Paula what? So we'll get through that today. So what I'm going to introduce you to is some ways, not just an introduction to Holacracy as a practice, but I'm also going to try and give you a few practical tips and tricks that you can take to work tomorrow to maybe move the needle a little bit on some of these limiting changes. So when you think about the way we work, what I want to start with is honoring what we're used to. Here's what we're used to. We're used to a management hierarchy where if you are at a lower level in the hierarchy, in order to get something approved, you need to go up the management hierarchy to get approval. Now, the good news is this model has served us really, really well for about the past 150 years. So we don't want to throw out this model and all it does for us without capturing that which is so good. So in the chat window, I want to ask you another question. Looking at this illustration of a typical hierarchy, now that we've talked about some of our limits, let's highlight some of the things this does well. So in the chat window, what is hierarchy? What is a traditional management structure? How does it serve? There are lots of ways that it actually can benefit. So in the chat window, I'd love to hear or see your suggestions and your thoughts on what does a management hierarchy do well? How can it serve? Because there are lots of ways that management hierarchy is way better than what came before, which is dictatorships and monarchies and no democracy, basically fiefdom, small fiefdoms, clear orders and controls. Yes, even if you don't love your direct supervisor, there is a very clear line of authority of who you need to get approval from in order to do something. So smart. That came from Amal. And yes, you can go ahead and end the poll. Listening to the employees and the concerns open-heartedly, overlooking, keeping an eye on progress, both as a company and as an individual, accountability and responsibility. Yes, clear lines, building, there's a clear trajectory. I love this one, buildup of skills and knowledge. There is a very clear trajectory in management hierarchy. You start at the bottom, and if you do well and perform, you will move up the ladder, as we say. Good way to introduce learning? Yes, all of these things. There are so many ways that management hierarchy serves us really well. And let's kind of flip that and say, in relation, appreciation and encouragement, yes. On the other side of that, there is a shadow to that light. So in terms of some of the challenges, specifically as it pertained to those limits that we saw earlier, what are the challenges of hierarchy? What are the shadows of things like control, buildup of skills, accountability and responsibility, ability to oversee progress? What are some of the shadows? There's Amal wrote, I'm not sure if this is a benefit or not a benefit. This could go either way. Unofficial lines of authority. I love this one because even though what we're looking at in this graphic is what we think the organization is supposed to look like, in most hierarchies, there are unofficial lines of communication and unofficial movements between individuals that, unless you are one of the privileged few, you may not know. Forming silos, limiting collaboration, absolutely. Management issues, if you have and blocked communication, so true. If you have an idea and it can't get past one level of management, it's very likely to die. One of the things I like to think about in terms of one of the differences in a healthy versus a less healthy organization is in an unhealthy organization, a great idea can be stopped by one person saying no. But in a healthy organization, a great idea can move forward just by one person saying yes. And that's what we want to get to, is a different paradigm. And yeah, sometimes your employees are like family and they need a cordial environment to grow and participate. How do we foster that environment of care and love while still getting the work done? If we have to rely on it, we're in almost handcuffs. David Allen, who is the author of the book Getting Things Done, one of my favorite things that he says is, it's an inappropriate use of love and care to use love and care to affect change. So how do we keep our relationships as humans sacred and honest while still getting the work done? We don't want to have to rely on our friendships to get the work done. So I want to kind of introduce then a different paradigm rather than a management hierarchy. And the way I like to do this is by starting with these two images you'll see. On the left, you've got traffic lights, pretty typical. On the right, you have traffic circles. And I want to ask you guys a question. There's a cool poll question here. I've got, which one do you think is faster? Which is faster? If we use traffic lights or the traffic circle? This one is usually people get this pretty quick. Oh, I gotta launch the poll. I launched. There we go. Thank you. So I've launched the poll here. What do you guys think? Oh, all right. We've got a couple here for one for traffic light, traffic circle. So for those of you who put traffic circle, gold star. According to traffic studies, just data on traffic studies, traffic circles are in fact faster than traffic lights. And so cool. Isn't that interesting that a traffic light where you are giving up your own personal autonomy and authority to a set of lights, you're giving it up, is slower than if you are using your own judgment and moving through a traffic circle. It's actually faster. Now here, let me ask you this. I'm going to end this poll. Let's kind of hit this from a different angle. Which is, actually, I don't see, I'm going to ask you to type it into chat. One of my polling questions got missed, and that's okay. Which one is safer? Which is safer based on, we have lots of traffic studies throughout the world. Just type into chat because unfortunately my poll isn't there. All right, traffic light is safer. So let's see a couple more. Circle can be a mess, true. All right, so of the few of you that have typed into the chat, most of you think the traffic light is safer. And I wanna applaud Sarah for being kind of the lone voice. According to traffic studies, traffic circles are far safer than traffic lights. And there's a very specific reason. And in order to get you to that reason, I'm going to launch this very last poll of which is harder. Which is harder, to stop when the light turns red and go when the light turns green, or to navigate what can be sometimes messy lanes of traffic, make eye contact with lots of other drivers, everyone's going to different speeds, getting off in different places. Yeah, traffic circles are way harder because you have to be present. And that's kind of the crux of different paradigms of working. I want to loop this back around. I'll end this last poll. It is much easier. It is easier to defer your autonomy and your authority to another source. We're raised this way. We're raised to respect and follow the guidance of our parents, our teachers, our spiritual leaders. And there's certainly nothing wrong with guidance and teaching and collaboration. Where it starts to get pathological is when we give up our autonomy without thinking about it, without using our best judgment. And on the left-hand side of this picture, in a traffic circle, we're not thinking about, should I really go or stop? We're thinking, the light's green, I'm gonna go. And in a traffic circle, you have to stay present and mindful and use your judgment. And that allows for faster and safer movement. So that's what we're going for, a paradigm where we're using good judgment, our own autonomy, our own sovereignty to make good decisions based on our learning and move faster and more dynamically. And there's this notion that, we'll take it from the traffic light, instead of deferring to a traffic light to empower you to move, you're deferring in a lot of management hierarchies to someone else. And the irony of empowerment is, I want to kind of just pose a rhetorical question, not expecting any answers. But the irony here is, if you need someone else to empower you, to tell you when to stop and go, what does that say about the system you're in? I would posit that if you need someone else to empower you, you are fundamentally disempowered. What you need is an environment that emancipates everyone to empower themselves, and then they can make a choice. There will always be individuals who would so much rather have a boss telling them what to do. They'd like to go into work, be given clear instruction, told what to do, and then leave at the end of the day. That's fine. I don't want to ever make a hierarchy into the straw man, is a phrase we use in the US, kind of the effigy, something bad. It just may not necessarily serve if we want to be an empowered individual and empower ourselves. Why would I want to wait for a boss to tell me something that I know to be a good idea to go ahead and try it? And so that gets me to a new model, which is an alternative system for structuring organizations called Holacracy. And I'm going to take you through the next slides a little more quickly, just to kind of run down a few things that I think real empowerment needs and that are provided with Holacracy practice. And when I get to the end of the next 3 slides, I'll pause to see if there are any questions. So 3 of the top things I think real empowerment needs. The first one is boundaries. One of the great things about the traffic metaphor is, so I have been in a car in Riyadh, and Riyadh drivers are amazing because lane lines are suggestions, but everyone follows the traffic lights, which is good. But everyone's using their best judgment because there are clear boundaries. Here are the lane lines. You choose to move between them, that's fine. But the idea that real empowerment requires clear, navigatable boundaries of what you can and can't do. And in most management hierarchies, there's an org chart that sort of tells you what you should and shouldn't do, and you have a job description. But if you think about your job description, I'm going to ask you to think about your job description that is supposed to be your boundaries. When is the last time you looked at your own job description to figure out whether or not you should do something? And here's better. When's the last time you went to a colleague and said, can I see your job description? I'd like to know whether or not I can ask you to do something. No, that's not the way we work. We stick our job description in a drawer, we put it in a file, and we kind of learn the informal boundaries that are around the office. Who do you ask for what? Who do you need to make friends with to get something taken care of? There are all these kind of shadow implicit boundaries that aren't visible. Never. Yeah, when I had a traditional job description, I don't think I ever looked at it. And my favorite part of any job description is other duties as assigned. What does that mean? So unless you are privileged to the implicit norms in your organization, which if you're a new employee are almost impossible to know on day one, you don't know your boundaries. And if you don't know your boundaries, you don't know where you're safe and where you might not be. Another thing that real empowerment requires are clear expectations. And a lot of times job descriptions are edited without being informed, right? And this kind of, harkens back to, has anyone else ever had a job where in the job description there is an other duties as assigned, or other tasks selected by manager or management? And sometimes you have to sign that job description saying, yes, I will just do whatever you tell me to. Almost all the time. Yeah. And that's normal. And when we didn't have other models, it was better than nothing. It was better than what we had. But now there are better ways to create clear expectations between individuals so that you can say with, I have to stop here. I've had jobs where even the direct manager doesn't know my job description. Me too. Yes. Where the manager comes to you and says, oh, can you get this done? Oh, well, actually my colleague sits right next to me, right there. That's their job. Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Because the manager is hired. They don't know their job description either. They haven't looked at it. I do everything except my job requirements. Yep. We all wear so many hats. What if we had a system where we could clearly define what could be expected from ourselves and what we could expect from our teammates, and more importantly, what we can't expect, so we have a pathway to figure out where the gaps are? Because that's why that other duties as assigned exists. It's so we have a junk drawer. And what if instead of just throwing things into a junk drawer, we had a way to identify and process those gaps to make clear expectations? And in order to do that, you need a process to change those boundaries and expectations. And it has to be an open process available to everyone to make, the ultimate goal of this is to make the implicit, the stuff that we learn by doing, we guess. My favorite one is, I don't know if you guys have experienced this in any of your jobs. My favorite is office supplies. There is always one person, you never find out on day one. Day one, you're handed one packet of Post-its and a pen, and you get to your desk and you use up that last Post-it, and you have to figure out who to make friends with to get more office supplies, or you have to go start buying your own. And I found, it's almost comical that there's the czar of office supplies at every working environment that you need to kind of buddy with. What if instead of having to learn when you ran out of Post-its who you have to make friends with to get more, what if there was a clear way to just identify who you could expect to help you find more office supplies? Pet peeve of mine, and I tell you, anecdotally, I think it's science. I think in management hierarchies, there's always one person who is the master or mistress of the office supplies. So in order to, getting back to a process to define these accountabilities, and the czar has a higher ranking czar to give you the green light to get the pen. It's so true. So true, Sarah. So in order to change these boundaries and expectations, to make them more clear, to make the implicit explicit, you need a rule set. You need rules of the game, and they have to be the same rules for everyone. And the way we do this in Holacracy is with a constitutional rule set. Think of it as your starting operating system on your computer. It's not going to do much other than hold some space for you to figure out what you need, what apps you want to add, what programs you want to add. And the big distinction here is that the rule set is the same for everyone, from the highest paid CEO founder down to the person who started on their first day. Everyone has the same rights and privileges, and everyone has the same ability to affect change using the rules of the Holacracy Constitution. Now, I want to take you through the way we organize a piece of work. And the way we do this is with something called roles. You're not going to see me use a whole lot of, there's a lot of language, there's a lot of vernacular in Holacracy practice. There's a lot of new things we have to learn in terms of terminology. It's like learning a new language. So when I'm introducing it, I tend to stay away from a lot of the jargon. But one piece I do want to carve out is something called a role, because it's the closest analog to a job description. But instead of a big long list of manage this, organize that, other duties as assigned, we chunk up the work into clear roles, which are pieces of carved out expectations that can move between one person and another. So when we're carving out, when we're defining the boundaries and constraints in our roles, we're doing it without the people sitting in them. Because a role is just a frame that's energized by a human. But often we get bogged down with, Reem is particularly good at this thing, so we're just going to ask her to do it. And then the one day Reem decides to take a vacation, someone asks, well, wait, why didn't that get done? Well, because Reem's not here. But Reem always does it. Reem never agreed to do it. It just kind of got assigned to her because she was good at it. Why not have a chunk of work that when Reem is out of the office can get picked up and handed to someone else? I see a question in the question box. I want to get to that before I dig into your intro. What? Oh,
I was about to read the question to you. I think it would be good to cover it at this point. So
Definitely.
It's from Manal Sayar. In which field sector can we apply the Holacracy structure/management?
Great question. In my experience as a coach for many years, the short answer is any. I have yet to find a sector or discipline where Holacracy practice cannot get adopted. We have educational institutions, we have medical institutions, we have insurance firms, even portions of government. There's a whole department in the Dubai government, the Knowledge and Human Development Authority, is using Holacracy practice for the entire authority. We have small entrepreneurial startups. We have departments in very large traditional organizations like Swiss Post or Denon or Google had a very small portion. Online retailers. There are certainly organizations that struggle a little bit. Management consultants, religious leaders, and developers for some interesting challenges. But even with those challenges, there is no discipline where I've not seen Holacracy practice be successful. Away from the job description, what about risk management and overconfidence with making decisions? I'm going to come back to that. That's a great question. I'll come back to that closer to the end and see what you think. Short answer is no structure, no management hierarchy. No structure is a substitute for good judgment. So if you choose to move to any sort of self-managed paradigm, you still need good judgment. You could have a perfect structure in place and then put 6-year-olds in all the jobs. And I don't know, 6-year-olds today are really, really smart, but you may not get the performance you want. You could have a mess and put geniuses in and be okay. But there's a happy medium. And certainly there will always be instances of overconfidence. It's how willing are you to, in terms of risk management, how willing are you to accept a little risk for the potential of good judgment and good fast movement. And you can use the process of the Holacracy Constitution. You can use the rules to put in boundaries and constraints so that you are managing your risk. And we can delve a little bit into how that might happen later. Then I see a question in the chat window, how accepted is it in the Arab region? You know what's interesting is I get a lot of questions about cultural, how accepted is it in X culture? There are always cultural concerns, and it just takes open-minded people. I have yet to find a culture where there aren't open-minded, smart people. And what I've found in the Gulf countries where I've helped organizations adopt Holacracy is it's the challenges are specific, are unique to Arab culture, but they're no worse or better than challenges in Asian cultures or in German, European cultures. So in my experience, there are certainly challenges with empowerment and authority, embracing your own sovereignty. But I've found that particularly in Arab culture, there's already kind of a bias towards openness and warmth and welcoming of new ideas and new types of people. So this is just one of that. And yeah, I totally agree. Gulf corporations have shown more progressive attitudes than other places in recent times. Totally agree. Dubai is a great example. If it's good for business, it's good for Dubai. Those are the words of the ruler of Dubai, which is not the case in the United States sometimes.
So we have another two questions.
Sure.
We have one from Muhammad. Away from the job description, what about risk management and overconfidence when making decisions?
I just answered that one, dear.
Oh,
that
sorry,
was the one.
Another one. Sorry. How can we break the culture barrier when adopting this practice?
I have no idea. I have no idea. You follow the rules is kind of my tongue-in-cheek answer. Is you follow the rules and you process the issues as they come up. So let's kind of talk about part of how we build some of these boundaries so that you can figure out how you might break down cultural barriers using these guidelines. And I'm going to hold the question on, there's a couple more that are coming in there. I want to get to them, but I want to get to my next few slides. So let's do those, and then plenty of time for questions. I think we have quite a bit of time. So let's talk about how the work gets chunked up. It gets chunked up with roles, and clear roles enable empowerment. They emancipate. And there are a couple things here that you'll notice about the role. I'm going to break it down in a minute, but what I want to get to is what I call the golden rule of Holacracy practice. The golden rule says to serve your role, this is totally different. To serve your role, you can make any decision or take any action unless there's a rule against it. And that's how we manage risk, is putting rules in place when necessary. But rather than front loading every rule we can think of through intelligent design, we base it off of what's actually coming up for us. So in the big kind of shift here, one of the biggest shifts in Holacracy practice is we're used to an environment where you wouldn't do something you normally wouldn't do unless you get permission. Here we're saying do anything that makes sense unless there's a rule against it. It's completely flipping it on its head, because Holacracy practice is not a bolt-on. It's not something, it's not a new set of practices you bolt on to your management hierarchy. It is a complete paradigmatic shift in how the work gets done. So I want to just leave you with that idea for a moment of what if, instead of staying in your lane and only doing what you typically do, you would only deviate from that unless you got permission. Now, some of you might be thinking, we have a really empowered, this is basically what we do already. We have a really empowered culture at our office. You know, we innovate, we do stuff. Just quick in the chat window, just type a quick yes or we have that. Does anyone think that they kind of have this culture already where you really can go and try something new and not worry about stepping on anyone's toes or getting angry or maybe making someone concerned or confused? No. There's a way to test this to some extent within your job description. Okay, this is interesting. Within my job description, yes. And what now the challenge to that is, what if there's something that's not in your job description that you think would serve your work? Can you do it? And a little mind experiment here. If you want to test whether or not you have a open, a free culture, go into your organization, make a radical change and see what happens. And the way to test this, go in one day and paint a wall red and see if anybody gets upset. If there's no rule against it, is there anything stopping you? Chances are, if you were to make a big change like that, what are you doing? Why are you painting the wall? Well, I find red invigorating. It helps me work faster. You should have gotten approval before painting the wall. Why? There's no rule against it. Chances are it'll spark some conversation. So if you ever want to test whether or not you're in an empowered culture, go in and try and paint a wall and see what happens. Standardizing procedures, yes, absolutely. It makes sense. Standardizing procedures is very different than empowered decision making. You can have rules in place to follow specific processes. Before we kind of get into the specifics of how the work gets done, I want to keep going and define the parts of the role. So one of the parts of a role, a chunk of work, you'll see up here is the purpose. Now, this is a role's reason for being. In the case of that role, Holacracy spokesperson, filled by Brian and also myself, the purpose, our reason for being, is to crystallize and convey the Holacracy brand, reveal its why to the world. Think of our role's purpose as that thing that, when achieved, means the role is no longer necessary. I have a great role in one of our circles in Holacracy, one of our teams, called training support. I do all the logistics. I support the event while it's happening. And my purpose is learners learning and trainers training. Someday, when learners are learning perfectly and trainers are training perfectly, there is no need for that chunk of work anymore. My purpose has been actualized. Might as well get rid of the chunk of work, which we can do using the process. But typically a purpose is so lofty that it will never be achieved. It's just something to work towards. The definition is the deepest creative capacity, and the use case is really to restrict scope or increase scope. So when you talk about risk management and limits and boundaries, you can use the purpose of a role to either increase or decrease the scope of the work within that chunk. The other things you'll see in roles, and I'll bring you back to the role slide so you can see all these again, is accountabilities. These are expectations. They're recurring activities that you can expect from the human being energizing that chunk of work. So there's a really good one here from spokesperson, defining criteria for acceptable speaking engagements, including format and budget constraints. Now you'll notice that it starts with an ing verb. That particular tense, you typically won't see those on job descriptions because it's manage, oversee, or do. Or you'll just see a bunch of bullet points that say things like event planning. Cool, what does that mean? By phrasing accountabilities as clear expectations, anyone in the organization can go to the human filling this role and expect that they will do this recurring activity. And we use them for aligning and clarifying expectations. And you remember a few minutes ago, I talked about the implicit expectations that get added to us all the time, rather than, and just accepting it, rather than what we can do here is identifying them as gaps and changing these accountabilities or changing the purpose of a role to fill the gaps in the work. Happens all the time. There's another kind of cool piece, speaking also to risk management and constraint. You also need to know your freedoms, and you clarify boundaries, especially for really important things like websites, bank accounts. You'll notice here, this is a different role filled by my colleague Olivier. The purpose of his role of website architect is a clear and stylish website for Holacracy and Holacracy 1. And you'll see he's got some expectations here, but he's also got this added part called a domain. Think of a domain as a piece of property. And what it means is his domain of the holacracy.org website is it's something exclusively controlled. One thing that may pop out to some of you is your organization's bank account. You don't want to put a system in place where, okay, to serve my role, I think it makes sense for me to go empty the bank account and take a vacation to Paris. Nope. You can use the rules of Holacracy practice to lock down pieces of property. And typically it's for the reason if you got too many cooks in the kitchen. We used to have, at Holacracy 1, we used to have a really small organization, and anyone could make changes to the website. But as we grew and got more sophisticated, it became pretty clear that there were some people who knew how to make changes to the website and some people who would go in and put pink sparkly text and big buttons, and they weren't keeping the website very pretty. So someone in the organization felt a tension. They felt a gap between what is and what could be. And in Holacracy, we use this term of tension as a neutral, bordering on good thing. Tensions are good, but really they're not good or bad, they're neutral. They're just a sense of, too many cooks in the kitchen, there are too many people making changes to the website. I think that we need a new constraint on who gets to make these decisions. And the outcome of that tension, the way it was processed, was to add a domain to the role of Holacracy website for Olivier's role of website architect. And so now he was the only cook in the kitchen, and if somebody else wanted to make a change, they had to get his permission. Now this is what's important, and this is what's a little different than the way we process tensions all the time. Whether or not you know you're doing it all the time in your current work. You're sensing the difference between, this is the way I'm doing it, but this is the way it could be better. Or simple things from, I used to use the photocopier this way, and now if I order my photocopies online, they get delivered and they're already collated, cheaper, more efficient. You sensed a tension with something that could be different. In Holacracy, we evolve one tension at a time. The smarter people are, the more likely they are to intelligently design what we think is the perfect system. And if nature has taught us anything, it's that trying to design a perfect organism doesn't work. Evolution, through small changes over time, one tension at a time, evolves organisms to be stronger, more resilient, and more agile. So in Holacracy, we evolve our system, we evolve these roles by sensing one little gap at a time and processing one little gap at a time. So I want to take a quick pause here to answer a couple of questions. Sarah, will you point me to whatever's new?
Yes, so we have two questions.
Sure.
The first one from Hussam. For someone who is pretty convinced about this approach, what should be the next step towards implementing it?
Oh my goodness, that is we could talk about that for a week. At the end of the call, the next step is really to learn. The next step's always learn a little more. If somebody comes to me and says, okay, we're ready to adopt Holacracy, I do my best to talk them out of it because it is a very disruptive change. But if you're pretty convinced, don't do it yet. Better to get to that place where you have a gut sense that you absolutely have to. And then talk to me, talk to Reem, talk to both of us. And I don't want to give any more answer than that until I know a little bit more context about your organization, because I can offer pathways, But at the end of the day, as a Holacracy coach, my expertise is in Holacracy practice and Holacracy adoption, and your expertise is in your organization. So without that additional context, I can't make specific recommendations. If you're pretty, but the one coaching point I'll say there is if you're pretty convinced, learn more. Go to another, we have some other types of learning events. We do some simulated, like a one-day online taster workshop where you actually see how Holacracy meetings work, how you would process these tensions in a simulated setting. We have some in-depth training that both Sarah and Reem have attended, and we have some coaching where we actually can go into your organization and help you build the habits that you need to build to sustain successful Holacracy adoption. So at the end, please feel free to reach out. I can get you some additional resources, and Reem is an amazing resource as well. But pretty convinced, keep digging, keep evaluating. I also see we can't change the hierarchy of the org, but we can adopt servant leadership. So true. I am a huge fan of servant leadership. Where I think the shift is in Holacracy is, as a human being, I actually capture my purpose in life as to sparkle and serve. That is how I capture my reason for being on the earth. That manifests in a lot of different ways. In my personal relationships, of course, I try to guide my friends and be a servant to them. Going back to the irony of empowerment, a servant leader is certainly benefiting those under their care and those that are subordinate to them. If you are a servant leader tearing down barriers for your subordinate, that's fine. And that, for a lot of organizations, that totally works. I don't want to dismiss it. If you want an environment where you have emancipated your subordinates to tear down their own barriers, maybe you're still a servant leader, but instead of serving the other people, you're serving the purpose of your roles, and so is everyone else. So you are all servant leaders of your roles together. You are no longer leading each other as leader subordinate, you are leading together. From a family point of view, if the organization is the child, instead of the people being in a parent-child, boss-subordinate relationship, you are all co-parents of the organization as your child. So you're all serving your organization through your leadership in your roles. So I think servant leadership as a methodology absolutely has a place in good Holacracy practice. It's just what you're serving is different. And then what's the difference between agility and Holacracy? Holacracy is just a rule set. Holacracy practice is simply a constitutional rule set that one can use to be more agile. If you're talking about specifically agile design, they're actually like agile, like Scrum, very, very similar. It's slow is smooth and smooth is fast. It's a phrase from the Navy. And it's the idea that with both agile and Holacracy practice, you're making tiny iterative changes to evolve over time to move quickly and be more resilient versus making top-down, intelligently designed changes to hopefully see better results. One way this will manifest is, I don't know if anyone's ever been through strategic planning, where you do a big organizational reorg and everyone gets new job descriptions and it seems great for 6 months to 18 months until you have to do it again. What we're saying is through both Agile and Holacracy practice is you do micro reorgs every week, every couple weeks, so that over time you're seeing big changes, but less disruptive. I want to kind of shift a little bit, unless there are any questions that I've missed, which I don't think I have. I want to kind of get away from, so that's how we do this. We change the pieces of work one tension at a time, and we use a specific meeting process to do it. There are a couple of different meetings in Holacracy practice, and I want to shift your attention a little bit from theory down to pragmatic with this question. What drives you crazy about typical meetings? Think about the last couple meetings you were in, virtually, in person, and type into the chat, what was there anything that drove you a little crazy about that meeting? Or was it perfect? And if it was perfect, I'd love to hear that too, because maybe I want to come work at your organization. It was long, right? Standard meetings tend to be long. No agenda. Monotony, lack of preparation, not follow. Sometimes there is an agenda, but you don't follow it. What are the expected outcomes? Yes, I've been in so many meetings where no decisions or follow-up, that we do a lot of talking. Lots of meetings are same agenda each year. Yep. We do lots of great talking, lots of great ideation, and then nothing happens. All these ideas, it's like at the end of the meeting, they go into a black hole. And yes, a lot on the screen and a lot of people talking, ambiguous expectations. Thank you. Exactly. I feel your pain. I've been there. So what if we had meetings that empowered? What if we had meetings that actually processed one tension at a time and gave us discernible, clearer outcomes? The point of the two different types of meetings in Holacracy, we have an operational meeting where we're working in the organization, actually coming up with what are we going to do. And then we have a different type of meeting where we work on the organization. How should the chunks of work be divided? And each of the meetings, the common thread is that we're processing one tension at a time, doing one thing at a time, and that thing isn't complete until the person who owned it, the person who brought it up, can say discernibly, yes, my tension is resolved, I have a pathway to move forward, or there is a new constraint in place to address this situation in the future. And unfortunately today, we don't have time to go into how those meeting processes work. But if you're interested in going through a simulation or viewing a webinar on both the operational and the other one, we call it governance, the way we organize the chunks of work, we have resources. I think we have some recorded webinars of those. And we also have a really cool live event. We call it an online taster workshop where you can learn more. And I'm hoping, I'm putting Reem on the spot here. I'm hoping at some point I'm going to do one of these in collaboration with CoReach, because CoReach is doing this. They're doing these meetings every day. They know this practice well. So I want to give you, this is kind of a sneak peek. This is what an org chart looks like in Holacracy. All these little dots are the roles, the chunks of work, and they're organized into teams. And every team, I think my organization needs. A lot of people say that is probably true, and I'm glad you're finding this useful. Every team gets its own set of meetings to define how they do their work. Just like when we talked about empowerment, that every organization, every person is emancipated to use their best judgment, every team is also emancipated to use their best judgment. And no one from outside can tell the team how to organize. They organize themselves. And the metaphor I like to use here is the human body. The lungs are not telling the liver how to do its job, because the liver knows how to do its job best. And what you end up with are fully functioning encompass systems inside other systems. So the digestive system is not telling the endocrine system how to function, but they're working in beautiful collaboration to keep your body moving. So for those of you in management, I see we have a couple of new questions, and I've got about just 3 more slides, and then we've got lots of time for questions. So I will open it up for anything, but I want to give you some kind of the light and shadow of this, of Holacracy practice, specifically for those of you who manage others. And this also works if you have a manager. These are some of the benefits and risks. And then I want to give you some things you can maybe try when you go into the office tomorrow and see what happens. So the benefits of self-management systems like Holacracy for those who manage others is you end up spending less time. We talked about servant leadership. Servant leadership is awesome, but you spend a lot of time solving other people's problems instead of doing the work of your work. So typically in organizations using self-management, managers, they're not spending all their time solving other people's problems, so they have more time to work on strategic items. If you got whatever discipline you're in, you probably got into it because you love the work. And what I hear so often from managers is they miss doing the work they were educated to do because they're spending all their time managing the people who actually get to do the work. So they miss it. You get to use your experience and skills to coach rather than direct. Because if you have expertise, moving to a self-managed environment does not negate the value of that expertise, especially if you've got years of experience as a manager. You know how to move things through, how to get things done. Instead of having direct to direct people, building followers, you can coach and mentor and guide. So you're a leader building other leaders. And then you're able to work on the tactical things you enjoy, particularly if my husband is a photojournalist for the news. And his boss, he's in a management hierarchy, his boss used to be a photojournalist, but he was really good at his job, so he got promoted to be a manager. No experience as a manager, and every so often he'll tell me, my husband will tell me that his boss sneaks out to actually cover a story, to take images and do that work because he misses it. And he doesn't get to do that anymore because he's stuck spending all his time managing other people. And there are other benefits, which I will let you think on. There are some challenges. So one of the main challenges, especially for managers, is our current habits. If we're used to being able to kind of draw the line and say, this is how we're going to do it, not having that lever to pull in that same way can be challenging. The mechanisms by which we communicate, even the way we communicate, if we're a manager, we might be used to saying something with a little more force, knowing that it will be executed. If you have a manager, if you're a subordinate, you might hear your manager say something and whatever they say, that's what you do. In a self-managed environment, the challenge for managers is to convey your expertise, convey your guidance, but with the idea that it's a gift. Here's my suggestion, but I fully acknowledge that you have every right to do it differently. Imagine somebody brand new to the organization saying to the founder, thanks for your input, but I'm actually going to do something completely different. That it's scary from both sides. And then learning how to lead in self-management without directing is really hard, especially if I have a vocal pattern where everything I say sounds like I'm directing someone. So learning to change the way you're speaking, your word choice, the frequency with which you communicate in order to, it's a very American phrase, to pitch your ideas, like a sales pitch. I want to pitch you on how I think this might work, knowing that you can choose something different and offering your ideas with no strings attached or no direction attached to it. So my last slide before we kind of get to some questions is here are some things you can try at the office tomorrow. The first one is at your next meeting where you've got the agenda and no one sticks to it, and you could focus on one tension, one thing at a time. So you could be that voice in the room who says, you know, I don't know that we've completed that agenda item to the satisfaction of the person who brought it. Let's check with them. Do they feel complete? Do they feel like they have a path forward? You can try asking the question, what do you need? Because that particular question invites pathways to movement. If you say to someone, can we talk about this? Sure. But if you phrase the question, what do you need? What do you need to move forward? And it's not what can I do for you? It's what do you need to move forward? And sometimes that's in the form of, I just need to talk it out. Sometimes they really do need a next step. They need somebody to do something, but at least that helps you to get clarity. In a lot of traditional meetings, the loudest voice tends to get the most airtime, and it's important to make room for the whispers as well as the roars. So you can try taking turns, harkening back to the kindergarten in our sandboxes where we learn to take turns. Somehow, as grown-ups, we completely lose our ability to take turns. So it's something to just try. You can notice when you see consensus behavior and go back to the actual person who needs to make the decision and say, consider everything you've just heard as a pitch, as ideas, and you decide what makes sense for you. And you can do that for yourself too. You don't have to make everyone happy. You just have to guard against harm. You can clarify requests when they're made. So I would imagine all of you have either gone to someone or had someone come to you with this, and you say yes before you've actually defined what that help means. Can you help me with my project? Maybe. What kind of help do you need? Well, I need someone to figure out what order these bullet points should be in. Okay, well, what order are they in now? Well, they're not actually ordered yet. They're in my mind. Okay, have you written them down? Well, no, not yet. Okay, well, when you write them down, I'd be happy to thought partner with you about ordering them. You've just committed to a very finite action. You will help someone put some bullet points in order once they've written them down. If you had said yes, can you help me with this? And you just said yes, you might have been stuck writing all of those bullet points and putting them in order and making the pretty slides. And yes, and thought partnering, it's the idea that you are not leading, you're not following, you're walking alongside in a journey. And so clarifying requests when they're made, one, will help you get clear on what you actually want, what help means. And from the other side, makes it really clear for the person who's saying yes to know what they're saying yes to. You can take opportunities to clarify expectations. That's the other side of, if someone asks you to run an errand for them, you might want to take a moment and say, I'm happy to do it once, but I'm not willing to do this on an ongoing basis. If you want me to do it on an ongoing basis, we probably need to set a new agreement or new expectation. If you're using management hierarchy, it's a little harder. If you're using self-management, we have a process in place to do that. But clarifying is the expectation once or ongoing. And then the key here, this is my favorite one, if you take nothing else away for tomorrow, is the next time you notice a gap that you're sensing that feeling from your belly of the difference between what is and what could be, you write it down. Even if you don't do anything with it at that moment, you write it down so you can come back to it later. So you can try some of those. Even if you take one or two to a management hierarchy, these are all really beneficial practices all the time. And I just saw a question here. Can this be done between friends? A deal. I'll bail you out this once, but not every day. Yes, I use self-management in my marriage. I have a clear set of expectations with my husband. He will only do the dishes if I put soapy water in them when I put them in the sink. And I will only do the laundry if the laundry makes it into the laundry hamper. And I have found that with friends, with personal relationships, clear expectations are so beneficial. I can say on behalf of many of my partners at Holacracy One, we use Holacracy practices in our personal relationships. We can't help it. And I think clear expectations between two individuals is always a good thing. Ambiguity is often the source of pain. So with that, we've got, Sarah, I went a little bit over, but I'm forgiving myself because I answered questions in the middle.
We do have two more questions.
Okay, happy
we have
to.
One which is lacking of preparation for the meeting by Durri.
So lacking in preparation, I guess it depends on what type of meeting. In traditional organizations, you have a lot of discussion meetings where, what is it you want to be prepared for? Ideally, when you're coming to a meeting in Holacracy practice, believe it or not, most or all meeting agendas are built on the fly. We build them right at the beginning of the meeting, And it's based on what are these gaps, what are these tensions that the participants are sensing between what is and what could be. The only thing you have to be prepared with is what's the gap. If you have to do that much preparation for a meeting, chances are it's an informational meeting. And what ends up happening in my experience is there are a few people in that meeting for whom the information is very relevant and want to hear all of it. And for everyone else, they're like, why am I here? Why am I listening to this? This person is not prepared, or I don't need this information to do my work. You end up needing less preparation if the meetings are far more targeted on outcome and clarity. Then if you need thought partnership, or you are preparing for a sales presentation where you want to be highly prepared, it's a different mindset. You're not trying to solve a tension, you're trying to prepare to sell your product, sell your service. If someone isn't prepared with their quarterly numbers or their metrics, their figures or their facts, that might be a tension for you. You might want to do something about it.
We have another question. Is there any criteria to assess the ability of organizations to adopt Holacracy style?
We actually have just started. We've got some data from a number of organizations. One large one in the state of Washington here in the US that adopted Holacracy in their entire technology department for the government. And they started, we found 3 criteria, and I know you're going to want me to remember them off the top of my head. How much autonomy someone had already, willingness to adopt change, and there's one more that I can't remember. We do have some ability to assess readiness to adopt Holacracy, and I can certainly talk about that more with a specific organization if you're interested. One of the main criteria, and I'll give this one to you if you're kind of flirting with the idea of adopting Holacracy, is we have to have commitment from the current explicit power holder. So in CoReach, way back in the day when CoReach was adopting Holacracy, Reem, as the founder and CEO, had to be 100% committed, because it is the explicit power holder that has the obligation and the decision to ratify the rule set, to say, I am ceding my authority, I am giving my authority as the founder and CEO into the Holacracy Constitution, and you may hold me to the rule set just like you hold everyone else. They have to be 100% committed, because they can, just like they flip that switch, they can unflip it anytime. So if you don't have the explicit power holder's commitment to play by the rules, they don't have to commit to, we're going to do Holacracy and never come back. They have to commit to being willing to play by the rules, or hold to someone else letting them know when they're not playing by the rules. And that can be really tricky for someone who has held the reins of their company for a long time. So that's to me as a coach, that is one test I do. I will not help an organization adopt Holacracy unless the explicit power holder, either of the organization or of the department that is looking to adopt, unless they are completely bought in enough to where I feel like they are committed to trying, I won't assist. That's kind of one of my huge red flags, is if the explicit power holder isn't interested or isn't committed, it is most likely the adoption will fail. Can we have a live example of how Holacracy practice can help us? Learned a lot in theory. Examples would make it better to understand the value. And then the second question, I will come back to that in one second. I actually do have one example I can share. Does Holacracy increase efficiency? In my experience, yes. One of the main benefits of Holacracy practice is an increase. It's one of the things that happens most quickly, is the increase in efficiency. There's always a dip where efficiency drops, but typically you'll find increased efficiency at the beginning. One example, this is kind of a fun one. I'm going to go back a few slides to this one right here. Let me see if I can get to it. Okay, so this accountability right here, the third one, defining criteria for acceptable speaking engagements, including format and budget constraint. That one wasn't always there. So Brian served as Holacracy spokesperson. We only had a couple of accountabilities, and we had another role in the circle filled by the newest member of the organization. And her role was to work with the hosts to put these speaking opportunities together. And she would do all the legwork. She would get the time and the budget. She'd get the all the logistics set up. And then she'd take it to Brian and say, okay, Brian, I've got a speaking engagement for you. He'd take one look at it and say, yeah, no, that's not our audience. I can't travel on those days. That's not a good idea. That budget, we don't need to charge that much. And he would shoot a lot of these speaking engagements down, which was completely disenfranchising and really frustrating for this new person who was just trying to do her job really well. So she went to one of the Holacracy meetings, one of our governance meetings, and said, you know what? I'm sensing a tension. My tension is I keep doing this legwork and then the speaking engagements are getting shut down. I want to know in advance what the criteria are and what an acceptable speaking engagement looks like. And the outcome of that tension was that third accountability, defining criteria for acceptable speaking engagements, including format and budget constraints. So Brian Robertson is the founder of Holacracy One. He literally wrote the book on Holacracy. And that accountability was put in place based on attention of a woman who'd been working for the organization for a couple months, brand new. And as soon as this accountability was in place, she had every right to go to him, go to the founder of the company and say, based on this new accountability, can you please get me the criteria for an acceptable speaking engagement? Imagine a paradigm where someone brand new to the organization can set an expectation on the person who founded it, and how much easier the work was now that he could use his expertise to define these criteria up front. And then when she's vetting the potential speaking engagements, she can vet against established criteria instead of guesswork. So that's kind of one of my favorite examples of how Holacracy practice both empowers everyone and makes the work easier. Imagine having clear expectations. A lot will be done with fewer challenges. Yeah. So I think we're at 11:16. We've got a few more minutes, but I'm not seeing any more questions, Sarah. So I'm complete unless there are any more questions.
Guys, any more questions? Put them in the box.
All right. I'm not seeing any. Oh, sorry. I'm a terrible person. I'm adding my feedback poll. I have been in, yes. If you would please complete this demographic,
Showing.
Should I drop off? I feel I don't want to, if anyone's not comfortable answering where I can see it, please complete this feedback. Sarah, do you want me to drop off, or are you okay with me staying?
No. It's basic information.
Okay, so yes, if you are still on the call, you'll see a poll that just got posted. Please complete it. And I promise not to be offended if you thought I stunk.
And we also, for those who can't see the poll, we just added the link.
Yes.
Or if you wish to answer it there, if you're not comfortable answering it here, you can just take the link and you can answer it in the website. And that way, the answers won't be visible to us at this point.
And then for those of you who maybe want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm putting my email address in the chat. You can also just reach out to CoReach. They have so much experience. They are living this every day. And yeah, do I suggest starting this change in a department rather than the whole organization? Oh, great question. And I would not answer. I don't know. Depends on your business, depends on the size of your organization, depends on which person is, if the CEO of the whole organization is 100% committed and the organization is small enough to not be too disruptive, I might suggest the whole organization, but I wouldn't know without talking a little bit more. Typically, I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat it. Holacracy adoption is wildly disruptive. So there's never a really good time to adopt Holacracy, but there are less bad times and less bad ways. So it really depends on the organization. If it's a big organization, I tend to start adoptions in a couple of more insular departments, HR, marketing, most of the internally serving departments, because if you adopt in the whole organization, at least everyone's struggling together. If you adopt in one department, not everyone has to struggle and you start building internal capacity faster. But the people that have adopted in that department have to walk two lines. They have to speak two languages for a while because they're operating in self-management inside their team, but translating to hierarchy outside. So it really depends on the organization. But feel free to reach out to CoReach or reach out to me if you want to talk about it a little more. Happy to thought partner with you.
I like a question that was put in the chat. Is Holacracy the opposite of office policies?
No, oh, office policies or politics?
Politics, sorry, office politics.
The opposite?
Yes.
Well, I think what it does, Holacracy practice is not the opposite of office politics. What it does is it shines a light on office politics and makes you deal with them. Because in a lot of traditional organizations, politics are great because they help you figure out what you need to do. And if you're clever and if you're well-meaning, or if you're power hungry, often you can use those politics to your advantage. In a practice where politics aren't necessarily a mechanism to get what you want, Holacracy practice will shine a light on instances where people are using politics to get what they need done and either capture it explicitly because it's good politicking, it seems to be working, or make it explicit that this does not fly and here is now a process or a constraint in place to guard against it. Because not all politicking is bad. Sometimes we use our best efforts. I think about organizations that have wellness teams, that have someone in the office who's just so committed to wellness, and they use all their politicking, they use all their love and care to try and get their colleagues to be more healthy and be more present. But what if there was actually a role for that? And you could expect someone to be focusing on the health and well-being of their colleagues, and they didn't have to do it as their own personal individual initiative. So there's benefits, and Holacracy is not the opposite, but it shines a light on it. Yeah, that's a great question. Anything else? Any other thoughts? Thank you all. I loved the amount of participation in the chat. I always love seeing. I think I pay more attention to the chat than my slides. All right. So
thank you.
Are we good?
Thank you so much.
I'm gonna end this.
Thank you to everyone who was with us, who joined us, who was courage enough to take this step. I think it takes courage for a person to, for a company to adopt Holacracy, for a person to choose to work under such a management system and to be part of such a management system. It's inspiring always, and thank you everyone for being here. And as Rebecca said, whomever is interested, reach out, let us know, and connect. And moreover, stay tuned because more of Holacracy is coming your way.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. More of Holacracy is coming your way. So yeah, stay tuned because we will reach out to you guys, and more good things are coming, inshallah, with Ramadan.
Okay, there I am. You can find me on LinkedIn. And yeah, thank you guys so much. And I think we're done. Yeah.
Thank you, Habibti.